You've got no problem with it.
No problem at all. Listen, this is relatively timid compared to what we've been dealing with the last couple of winters. You too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no big deal.
Hey, let me ask you, Governor Christie, I was reading earlier in this hour the CNN poll, more Americans than ever believe that the terrorists are winning against America. How would a President Christie's foreign policy and approach to terrorism differ from a President Hillary Clinton?
Well, first off, because Hillary Clinton, said the other night in the debate in New Hampshire that she thinks we're exactly where we need to be with ISIS. I think that's an opinion that most of the American people do not share, as is evidenced by that poll. Listen, we need to do a few things. First, we need to protect the homeland first and foremost. And the way to do that is to increase our intelligence capability and increase our law enforcement capability. I did this for 7 years as a federal prosecutor in the immediate aftermath of September 11th in one of the most threatened areas of the country in the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area. And the way to do it is to give our intelligence officers and our law enforcement folks more of an opportunity to see information, to be able to connect dots, and to intervene before the attacks happen. We did that on a number of cases when I was U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, and we need to restore that capability. The President, Senator Paul, Senator Cruz took away some of those tools this past summer. I would restore them as President of the United States. Then we need to put together a coalition of our NATO allies and our Sunni Arab allies in the Middle East to really take on ISIS in a direct and frontal way, not the way this president is doing it with no plan, treating them like they were the JV. This is a president who just said last week the reason Americans are so anxious that what you see in that poll is because they watch too much cable news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. It's head-shaking. And so we would take a very aggressive posture towards it, and making our first priority protecting people in their homes, in their neighborhoods, and that's with law enforcement and intelligence capability that's much greater than what we have today.
Governor Christie, when I watch the Republican debates, I'm often discouraged by how quickly they've got to jump from candidate to candidate. So I wanted to talk to you about one key moment in the last debate. You were talking about Syria establishing a no-fly zone, and you were asked if the Russians violated the no-fly zone, what would you do? Rand Paul had this response to you about, there's your World War III candidate. And we're always rushing from candidate to candidate. Explain to me how you would deal with Syria given Russians' involvement in Syria.
Well, first is that the president should have never permitted and invited, which is what he did, Russia into Syria. They're Iranian allies. They're allies of Assad, who is a murderous dictator.
Yeah.
And why you would want to do that is beyond me. But we're now past that, and they're there. I would say that part of dealing with Syria is to deal with the refugee problem first. And I don't want there to be more Syrian refugees. The way to prevent that is to set up a no-fly zone, a safe zone within Syria for those who are threatened by the war that's going on there to go to, so they can remain safe and not have to leave their country. Most Syrians do not want to leave their country. They are running for their lives. That's why a no-fly zone, a safe zone in Syria is so important. It will put an end to the refugee crisis, which is one of the things that's really threatening European security and ultimately American security if we continue, as the president wants to allow Syrian refugees into the country. Secondly, on the no-fly zone, a no-fly zone is a no-fly zone. Now, I would be very direct and transparent with President Putin and say this applies to Russian aircraft as well. If after a very clear warning from the President of the United States, the Russian military decided to test me, then I think you have no choice but to shoot down that aircraft. And the problem with the position of a guy like Senator Paul is that he would pull America back, to Fortress America. I'm thinking it's going to keep us safe. It's not going to keep us safe. These folks will come here to fight us. And so the fact is, I think having a no-fly zone will help with the Syrian refugee problem in a significant way. And I don't believe that the Russians would go into an American no-fly zone if they had a strong, resolute president who was very clear with the Russian president that this was something that shouldn't be done.
Another great question that was asked at the debate, Governor Christie, was about these dictators that are in place across the Middle East. There are some thought that, they're bad guys, but we got to leave them in place because of the chaos that results when we topple them. How do you approach that in regard to the leadership in Syria and other leaders in the Middle East that really aren't friends of the United States?
Well, let's start off with the ones that were friends of the United States. I mean, I think it was a gross mistake for the President and Secretary Clinton to support the ouster of Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. We've had nothing but the Muslim Brotherhood or a military dictatorship since then. And certainly President Mubarak was a longtime ally of the United States. I'm not a guy who's for regime change for the sake of regime change because we may not like or agree with the leader in a foreign country. I think that American interests have to be implicated. Now, the problem in Syria now is that Assad has killed 250,000 of his own people and has created two crises we need to deal with. The refugee crisis, which I mentioned before, and ISIS. ISIS is a product of Assad's absolutely Shia, induced military assault on Sunnis inside his own country, which led in large part to the creation of ISIS. And so sometimes these regime changes need to be done because not doing it leads to an even worse result and even more chaos. And so I think it's a very difficult thing for an American president to decide. But I do believe that in Syria, leaving Assad will not allow us to come to ultimate resolution of that problem in Syria.
Governor Christie, I wanted to switch to economic issues because I know you're crisscrossing Iowa and people are talking to you about growing incomes, creating jobs. What are some key things that President Christie would do in his first year as president to try to get this economy really growing and incomes up?
Well, we changed the tax code first. It's very important because right now American people feel like the tax system in this country is rigged for the rich, and they're right. It is. And what we need to do is get rid of all these deductions and special interest loopholes in the tax system. I would keep only two, Jeff. The first would be the home mortgage interest deduction, and the second would be the charitable contribution deduction. If we got rid of all the other special interest deductions and loopholes in the individual tax code, we could lower our rates to 28% on the top end, which is where Ronald Reagan had it in 1986 when he did tax reform, and down to 8% on the low end. And people could do their taxes in 15 minutes. That would allow people to have more of their own money, stop wasting time on tax preparation and expense on that, and allow us to fire a whole bunch of IRS agents. All those things would help our economy to grow significantly with more money in the pockets of people in a simplified tax system. We need to stop the double taxation on corporations in this country. We're one of the few countries, along with North Korea, that double tax our corporations. If they pay a foreign tax overseas on profits, they have to repay it again. So we see what's happening. They're keeping their money overseas, not investing it in creating American jobs and increasing American wages. I would stop the double taxation, and I would lower our corporate tax rate from 35% to 25%. And third would be on regulation. This government's in every corner of every person's life in this country. Last year, 2014, 81,000 pages of new federal regulation on the books, the most ever in 1 year by any administration. We need to lift the regulation off of people. I do it the same way I did it as governor of New Jersey. My first executive order was to freeze any new regulation from any department or agency of state government for 90 days. If I were president, I'd do that for 180 days, and then send the vice president out to get suggestions from businesses across the country and individuals about what regulations we need to get rid of. And then with a stroke of the pen, you can do that. We did it in New Jersey. We got rid of 1/3 of all the regulations that my predecessor put in place at the end of the first year, which really helped New Jersey's economy grow.
Governor Chris Christie joining us on WHO Radio. Governor Christie, you're campaigning across Iowa. We're making that final turn to the caucus. What do you want to say to Iowans? Why should they caucus for Chris Christie?
Well, here's the reason, Jeff. This is a really dark, dangerous world right now. And I spent 7 years as a federal prosecutor, named U.S. Attorney by President Bush on September 10th, 2001. And so this next 7 years were about me fighting terrorism, catching terrorists, and making sure that we kept the homeland safe. I think we need a president who has that type of experience. And then the next 6 years as governor of a very difficult-to-govern state, a Democratic majority in the legislature, Democratic majority among the voters, yet we've done things like cut taxes, reduce spending, reform teacher tenure, bring greater growth to the state in terms of job creation, 225,000 private sector jobs. The point is that you need someone who's actually made decisions. We do not need to go to another president like the one we have now, where you need on-the-job training for that president because it's never run anything bigger than a 30-person Senate staff. That's not good for Democrats or Republicans in this country. We need someone who has spent the last 13 years making decisions and being held accountable for those decisions and who knows how to keep America safe. I'm the only person on that stage that's fought terrorism and had to make decisions on how to fight it and made all the other decisions you make as a governor. I'm the guy that I think they're going to want sitting behind that desk to clean up the mess left to us by Barack Obama.
Governor Chris Christie joining us on WHO Radio. Governor Christie, Happy New Year, and we'll see you and talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and we'll be back after the New Year.
Jeff Angela sitting in for Jan Michelson on News Radio 1040 WHO.